I've just saw another question, and we'll take that question, lady at the back, and then we'll ask Lesley again to respond. That's going to keep you fit.
Hello everyone, my name is Christine Richard. I'd like to give you a small example of actually how you can do this in a community. I was fairly recently the Chief Executive Officer of an organisation called Smile Childcare, which was in fact a social enterprise supported by the local council. Now, what we were able to do there was engage with the existing places. We took babies from 6 to preschool children. I felt that they should play outside in the rain, as my children had always done, so I got a private company, Places for People, to sponsor wet weather gear for the children. I got Tysos to sponsor wet weather gear for the staff. You see where this is coming from. We engaged with the Wester Hills Community College. Friday afternoon, their students weren't in, so our after-school clubs could use existing facilities in the Wester Hills Community College, the sports facilities, which we did. We had after-school clubs in various places. We did encourage the children to grow their own fruit and, well, vegetables. You can't grow a lot of fruit, actually, in Wester Hills. Now, this is a community, different from Coldstream, different from a small town, but it's still a community. So we had breakfast clubs. I got artists in to sit and draw with the children, and musicians, live musicians, to play instruments with them, to teach them how to play, to take them away from the screens. And none of this actually costs any extra money, because we worked with the public sector, the private sector, the parents, the children themselves, who learned how to serve each other lunchtime, for example, and make their own tea at the after-school clubs. And finally, we forged a relationship, a partnership with a very posh private school in Edinburgh, and our students went into that school, their students came into our organisation, and quite recently, students from both the Wester Hills Community College and this rather nice Edinburgh school went away together to discover what they had in common. Now, it's place, it's people, it's cooperation, it's partnership, public sector, private sector. As my kids would say, it's a no-brainer, so let's just do it.
Thank you. Okay, ideas testers, it's a no-brainer. It's a good idea. Why is it not happening? Lesley or Ian, who wants to come back on that?
Well, I'd like to say Graham for Pope. You know, I mean, that's, I couldn't agree more with everything you said there. And actually, the minute that Jim started speaking, I wrote down the word Lindley. And it's funny, I was at an event yesterday where this same issue came up, which is I just don't think we know how much our lives have been constrained by that awful event and by the reaction to it. And it's strange because I don't think as Scots we are a tremendously safety conscious bunch of people naturally, but I think we're people who don't like ambiguity, and once the notion of risk is introduced to a situation, we have no means of embracing it with common sense and limiting it. I mean, if somebody raises the question, what if? We answer it, God love us. You know, an awful lot of people will just go, what if Schmiff, you know, whatever. And there's got to be a stage now. I mean, we've all seen this. There's no point in us sitting swapping any more anecdotes. However, the one, because Christine mentioned it there about nurseries, the other point I put down was that this is not just about the built environment. The great tragedy of Scotland is how indoors our children are. I've done quite a lot of work with Norway. I'm currently a PhD student based in Oslo and Strathclyde and learning Norwegian. You know, the difference between our countries is not the rain. They've got worse weather than us. It's that their children are out in it, and they're also not going to proper school until the age of 7. So there's a lot we could see there. They also have the smallest municipal government in the world. They have units that correspond to how people live, and I'm sorry to keep coming back to that. We will keep bumping off the size of what we reckon a community to be until we recognise that it's far, far smaller than a council unit. So we can go along like this, and development trusts are great. All in support of development trusts, which is the quiet revolution that seems to me to be happening around Scotland, where people start off with maybe owning a village hall, maybe owning a wind asset, all sorts of different assets, and from that, with one anchor asset in the community, you can build. It doesn't matter, it could be a housing association, a community-led housing association. Each community has got an anchor asset like that already, and perhaps the thing to do is to piggyback on to that one and allow an organic growth, really, of what the community is able to manage. But you'll end up, if you just keep consulting people, have we not been through that enough? Have we not managed through the long years of the start of the Scottish Government, have we not managed enough acronyms to say that we're, you know, dangling stuff in front of people, and then when they come up with something a wee bit awkward, snatching it away again? We can't do that anymore. That's over. So, Graham for Pope, Christine, I always thought you were wasting council. What a fabulous example you've got there with Wester Hales. And the thing that just kills me about this country, and to be serious for a moment, that's why I'm learning Norwegian, because if this doesn't change, I'm off. Seriously, you may be laughing with a kind of sense of relief that one awkward squad member is, you know, packing her passport, but we have got to change this. You know, it's not a kind of, you know, parlour game anymore. Every community is sitting, hemorrhaging talent, telling people who are stuffed with capacity that they have no economic value. And if that doesn't change, this place will rot like it is going to rot from the feet up. And no amount, I'm afraid, of enterprise communities or attempts to kind of titivate it up will alter the fact that we're just hemorrhaging talent, and we've got to stop it. So I absolutely.
I would echo a lot of that. I think really where we are now, for all sorts of reasons, we have to recognise we need different ways of working. If we're going to just continue to have viable, successful communities. And it means different ways of working in terms of engaging people. You can't just, I will be saying later on, you can't just consult people on kind of one-off time-limited bases and then expect to progress from that. It needs a continuous dialogue. That continuous dialogue needs a kind of framework around it. That kind of framework around it needs to be something that is ongoing, to engage people, that you have real decisions to be made about their communities in the future. And yes, they will make different decisions from down the road. So the thing that seems to be missing to me is that it's not about new resources, because there aren't going to be any. It's about existing resources, spending them differently, spending them in a different order. And the key bit that's missing are enablers or facilitators, mediators, call them what you want, that play that role of actually getting to grips with the community interests and getting to grips with all the other relevant stakeholders, agencies, etc., that make things happen in a place. And it's not about communities coming up with a wish list, which they then haven't got a clue as to whether or not it's deliverable. It's about making these things realistic, and that's about dialogue, and it's about understanding each other's needs, and it's about trusting each other, building trust, building a relationship. That takes time. That stop-start funding and stop-start consultation processes don't support. So we really do have to kind of take apart governance at the local level and the relationship, therefore, at all tiers of democracy. And so, yeah, I very much support, I think, what was being said.
Okay, good. So we have some themes. I'm going to move on, actually, to hold that thought, and we will come back to we're going to take another question, I think, just to move things on a little bit. There's some really interesting things coming out already. Let me just shuffle my... here's an interesting one. So Noel James from Historic Towns Forum has an idea. There she is. Could you outline your idea for us, Noel?
It actually started as a question. I sent the information about today to my executive board. We've been doing a lot of work around so-called heritage-led regeneration, and I asked them what they would ask a panel. So the question my executive board put to me was, can you have a successful town that doesn't have a history? Which leads into the idea of, is heritage-led regeneration an actual thing, or does it connect to different factors? And how well linked up in our towns and cities are heritage as a concept, regeneration as an actuality, and tourism as an economic driver? So the idea that they pitched was, can towns and cities come up with a unique selling point based on 3 main points to do with places, peoples and partnerships, and can that be marketed as a USP to bring in not only external visitor economy but to generate pride within the communities. And it's the communities themselves who are going to know what those 3 points of the USP are. Historic Towns Forum link in to quite a lot of different areas to do with the economy, but our USP is history and heritage. And so as well as this being an idea for helping to regenerate not only the pride but also the economy of towns and city centres, it was also a question as to how well those things are perceived to be linked.
Yes, that's fine, thank you. Well, so basically, can they have towns and cities as great places if they've got no sort of link to the history? I'm going to ask Ian to respond first this time. Ian?
I was tempted to quote various English towns that I can think of where I can think of absolutely no assets that would be worth promoting, and that's a terrible thing to say, but you know, you look at them and you think, oh God, it's Clone Town. Where has it, you know, it's ripped everything out of any interest physically. But every place has got a history. Every place has got something, perhaps in its dim, distant past, which it can draw on, which it might well have made less use of recently. So I think that, as I think the questioner was indicating, heritage comes in many forms. It comes in the built form, it comes in the social form, the sort of the memories of place. That we were looking at Cheviot, which on the face of it you might say, big green spot with a few sheep. Not a lot of tourists go there, but huge potential just on the border between 2 huge populations. And we started from the perspective of what history could we draw through from recollections. Even people living today, elderly people, could recall how places had been used, how routes across Cheviot had been used in ways which they are no longer used, in an economic function, and all the social history that went with that. You start to plot all of that lot together. You can do that on a town level as well. You can start to see how places have functioned. And I think then it's what you do with that knowledge. How can you draw that through to events, celebrations and things to actually create a sense of place, a sense of uniqueness that other people want to come and take part in and celebrate, which has an economic, social and potentially a cultural built value, because if a place is becoming valued, it tends to get more investment. So can places that haven't got this succeed? Yeah, my initial thought was you know, Reading, good God, probably a no-hoper, but actually...
You do know you're being filmed today.
That's by English TV. No, it's a simplistic approach, and I think you can see beyond that. I think everywhere in the UK and across the world has a history which is worth celebrating and can be of use in regeneration.
Okay.